Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday video and welcome to April. It is April 1st if you are watching this on a Wednesday, and it is March 31st still if you're being proactive. But in any case, it's miraculous that we made it this far despite all the crazy things happening. Let's jump into what we're doing today. So this will actually be our last day of literary analysis with Homegoing. We're going to finish the novel next week. So we are going to wrap up this conversation about rhetoric with some rhetorical strategies or devices, as sometimes they're called, or even techniques. But I like using the word strategies because I think that respects the fact that when we're thinking about rhetoric, there is a person behind the text who is thinking deliberately about how exactly they want to impact or appeal to you. Hence, strategies. Okay, there's so many names, so many cool technical names. I'm just going to talk about the ones that stand out in the reading for today in Ya. So I'm going to go over those, and then I'll tell you what exactly we'll do with that information. Okay, so let's just jump straight into it. Here are the strategies that I at least personally found in Ya. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many more, but I'm going to go over these because Ya found them helpful, right, to convey the information she wants to convey in Ya. I put them in this order simply because of alphabetical order. Okay, so these devices exist. These devices exist so that she can appeal to your sense of credibility, appeal to your emotions, appeal to your reason. How exactly authors and speakers can appeal to you is more specific than just ethos, pathos, and logos, as we were already talking about. These names only refer to that specificity with more focus, right? How exactly does Ya appeal to your feelings, perhaps with sensory detail? How does she appeal to your logic and reason, perhaps with author surrogate? Okay, so let's jump into these more specific ways of thinking about how an author can appeal or impact you or the reader in general. So let's start with anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition, hence this little symbol, the repetition of words or phrases at the beginnings of lines. So I Google image anaphora and I found this little buddy. Reach for a leaf, reach for a cloud, reach for a sky of blue. What's helpful about anaphora is that when you have the repetition at the beginnings of these lines, not only are these lines emphasized, reach for, reach for, reach for, but also it helps to separate what comes after that, right? Every line isn't completely new information. There's only one new little bit of information: leaf, cloud, sky of blue. And anaphora helps the reader organize that information in their head accordingly. Again, it emphasizes the words that are being repeated, and it helps separate and distinguish the words that come after that repetition: leaf, cloud, sky of blue. Anaphora. Okay, let's move on to Asyndeton. Asyndeton. So allow me to help you understand Asyndeton. A is a prefix that means without. Syn is a root that means togetherness. Hence, we have without togetherness. There are no coordinated conjunctions in Asyndeton. They're deliberate run-ons. It's not just a grammar mistake if you do it on purpose, I suppose. So Asyndeton is one of those cases where it's deliberate breaking of the rules. So the example, again, that I Google imaged was I came, I played, I won. Right? So we could have put a coordinated conjunction here. We could have put and I won, but I won, yeah, I won, so I won. But the author decides to remove that. They exclude the conjunctions. By doing so, when you read these lines, I came, I played, I won, they kind of blend together. They become that much more cohesive and overlapping. Another way of understanding asyndeton is to consider its opposite, polysyndeton. Poly, the prefix, means many, right? So as opposed to excluding conjunctions, you're going to add more than necessary. I came, and I played, and I won. By adding these conjunctions, you separate those subjects and verbs more than they should be, right? So you make them even more distinct. They're incohesive. They are distinguishable more than if you had used asyndeton, which is the opposite. Again, the exclusion of those conjunctions leads to cohesion and indistinguishability. Okay, so that's asyndeton. How cool. All right, let's move on to Author surrogate. So I talked about this implicitly when I first introduced the rhetoric with logos, talking about logos, and many people have been able to catch these moments of author surrogacy in their readings afterwards. But a surrogate means a substitute. Somebody is, oftentimes when we use the word surrogate, we're talking about surrogate motherhood. So you have a woman who is capable of giving birth. They give birth to a child for another pair of parents or guardians who want to care for that child, but perhaps couldn't have had a child on their own, right? It's a substitute mother, if you will. Okay, so author surrogate is when Gyasi, in this case, the author, puts herself in the place of a character. The character is acting as a substitute for her, right? I am the character Ya, but I'm actually Gyasi. Ya has very particular moments where he's speaking as himself, yes, narratively, but we have good reason to believe that it's actually Gyasi wanting to speak to the reader more explicitly. Through her narrative, right? There's also audience surrogates. Sometimes characters will be surrogates for you, the reader, in the narrative, right? They'll ask the questions that you were thinking, or they'll feel the feelings you were feeling, right? But for now, let's go ahead and just focus on author surrogate, when the author puts themselves in the novel as a character and speaks and does things, okay? Author surrogate. Let's go ahead and move on to frame story. This one's kind of simpler compared to the other devices, strategies we've gone over. This is just a story within a story, right? This happens a lot, what with the many flashbacks that happen, and when there are side stories the character needs to tell, or the narrator needs to tell to better understand the character's main story. This is just a story within a story. And naturally, because it's a story within a story, it's a smaller story, right? Most often it'll be flashbacks, but sometimes it'll be tangentially related brief narratives that fit alongside the main narrative, the main plot. Okay, frame story. Let's move on to narrative hook. So Gyasi, especially in this chapter, likes to lead with punchy one-liners. They're punchy because the way they're worded, it's powerful wording. Oftentimes they're short, right? So I put here jarringly in parentheses because they don't have to be jarring, but they're usually kind of jarring. That's part of the effect of the hook, bringing you into the narrative. Essentially, because it's so punchy, it eliminates any other distractions you would have had outside of the text, right? Let's say somebody was having a conversation to you, and then you read this one line, you'd be like, hold on, I need to keep reading now, right? It hooks you in at the beginning of the plot. Technically, these hooks can come in between the plot too, right? Whenever you have those big section breaks, it looks like Gyasi pressed enter more than one time, and then she starts writing again. Narrative hooks can come in those places too. So it's not just the beginning of chapters, it could be the beginning of sections, and subsequently they could happen deeper within a plot diagram. Okay, that is narrative hook. Alrighty, and the last one, sensory detail. Perhaps the easiest to understand. It's just when the author appeals to your senses: vision, hearing, smell, taste, touch. Right, so they'll describe the things, the way they smell, describe how they taste, describe how they feel. Pretty basic. It's just that even though we most often talk about senses as 5, right? Literarily speaking, there is the 6th one, motion and movement. We could feel things moving. So I have a picture of a dancer here, or a rocking ship. If an author were to describe that, technically it would be some sort of amalgamation or mix of these basic or fundamental 5. But motion and movement is usually talked about with distinction and separately when we're talking about sensory detail in a literary sense. Okay, and that counts as a rhetorical strategy. And that's all. Those are all 6 we were going to go over. So the task for today, you're going to do a quick video check in Schoology. It's just going to ask you to put the definitions of these rhetorical strategies in your own words. You could use bullet points. They could be super short. I just need you to show that you understand what I just talked about because I can't do it in person, sadly. Okay. And then you have a class task where you apply this understanding of rhetorical strategy. So let's take a look at that. So last step 4, class task, rhetorical strategy. Rhetorical strategy. You'll find a moment in Ya when Gyasi employs at least one rhetorical strategy. We talked about them separately, but they could in theory happen all together. But you have to find a moment where she uses at least one. Okay, I've listed them here. And then you're going to write a literary analytical paragraph. So that means I want you to make claims, support those claims with evidence, and then warrant the evidence, explain how the evidence connects back to the claim, proves your claim true. explaining how Gyasi uses that strategy to impact or appeal to the reader. In short, how does Gyasi use a rhetorical strategy to impact the reader, right? What exactly is the specific impact that this strategy has? So I give you some tips to lead with a clear and precise topic sentence. Usually when we practice new terms, right? Logos, pathos, ethos are now all these rhetorical strategies. We fall into the habit, understandably, right? We fall into the habit of saying Gyasi uses fill in the blank with whatever the thing I just learned, right? Which is not wrong. It's just that you could be more precise, right? So instead of saying Gyasi uses Anaphora, you could say Gyasi repeats X, whatever variable that is, at the beginning of lines narrating Ya's backstory in order to, right? And now you're way more specific than you would have been if you just used Anaphora, the word Anaphora. But by reading your piece, I still know you're talking about Anaphora. It's very obvious, okay? You don't have to name the strategy in order to talk about the strategy. Integrate quotes. The strategies and examples are in our writing resources folder in Schoology if you need that extra help. And then submit that, and then you'll be done with Wednesday. How exciting. Your last literary analysis day for homegoing. And a year. Whoa, right? Because this is our last novel. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Wednesday questions, comments, and concerns forum. You could text me over Remind, or you could meet me in conferences. But until then, hang in there. Enjoy April Fool's Day.